Right. My story begins a little over a year ago. My husband and I had just returned home from our COT leave from seeing friends and family back in Hawaii and the States. We immediately went back to work. We don't believe in coming home and taking an additional vacation, though we should start doing that. There was a Friday afternoon, and I was waiting for my husband to pick me up from work. I was sitting at the desk and started to not feel so well. Didn't understand what was going on, thinking maybe it was jet lag, and went to the break room to grab some water. Came back over to the desk, and in front of our desk we had a couch. And I figured maybe I can sit on the couch and clench onto a pillow and maybe feel a little sense of comfort. It didn't work. I was sitting on that couch and immediately leaned over to the left and felt excruciating pain in my lower left flank. I immediately knew what was going on. I proceeded to get nauseous. When I was done, I ran straight to that phone and called my husband and said, "I don't care how much time you have left in work, you need to pick me up right now." I was having a kidney stone attack. Had kidney stones since I was about 17 years old. They usually affect me every couple of years, and pretty much we just deal with it. I know in every situation I pretty much end up in the emergency room because I can't handle that pain, and it usually takes morphine to make me feel better. We proceeded home, and my husband had asked me, "Well, are you going to take some medication to feel better?" And I looked at him in excruciating pain, and I said, "Well, I'm late, so I don't know if I can take any medication." So I told him we're pretty much going to end up in Bottom's emergency room, and sure enough, we did. While we got home, he decided that he needed to take care of our dogs and took them out for a walk. While he was walking our dogs, I continued to call ambulance services and had explained I was having a kidney stone attack, but we just found out that I was pregnant. While he was walking the dogs, I went in the bathroom and took a test. Waited a few minutes later, sure enough, little pink plus sign. Would have think our expectation in life was finding out we were pregnant with our first child would be this overjoyous experience. We get to experience it together and not while he's walking the dogs and I'm in pain. He proceeded to walk back in the door. I was sitting in a chair similar to this, waiting for the on-call doctor to get back with me. It turned out to be Dr. Bean, if any of you remember him. So I'm on the phone with him and I explained, "I'm having a kidney stone attack, just found out that I'm pregnant and I don't know what to do." So his first question to me was, "How do you know you're pregnant?" And in excruciating pain that I'm in, I just went in the bathroom, peed on the stick, and it said that I was pregnant. And he's like, okay. So he sent us straight to Bottom. We got there, and just to sum up the whole experience, turned out that I had an 11 millimeter kidney stone stuck in my ureter. And I know for most people to try and imagine what 11 millimeter stone is, I looked it up online to get a good reference. For women, they'll love this one. It's a 4.5 carat diamond. So imagine that being stuck inside of your ureter. We ended up having emergency surgery and pretty much got through the experience. We then decided to go on, and we just had the roughest pregnancy ever. And I know for most women out here who want to have children or have been through childbirth themselves, we experience different things. No pregnancy is ever the same. We all go through our own difficulties. But I'm pretty sure all the difficulties in this room summed up, I had it all. From the kidney stones to morning sickness to swelling to multiple surgeries during my pregnancy because of the stones, basically led up to a late-term delivery. They were all expecting me to go early because of all the complications we had, and they were guessing he would be about 7.5 pounds. We ended up being induced a couple days over 41 weeks and had the most difficult delivery. They had induced me. I wasn't making any progress at that time. Basically, the induction Pitocin medicine they were giving me wasn't working. So what had happened was they said if we don't start to make any progress, they were going to send me home. And I looked at her and I'm like, we are having this baby today. She proceeded to give me more medication, and we finally were making some progress. We got all the way up to the end, and we started to push, and basically we were pushing for 3 hours. So about that 2.5-hour mark, they moved us into the delivery room, and we were expecting maybe within an hour to meet our son. Well, that didn't happen. We were in there and we were pushing and pushing and pushing. My mom and my husband were in the room with me, and we were not making any progress. My son was being just as stubborn as I am. Our doctor at that point had basically tried everything she possibly could. She got out the vacuum, tried to vacuum him out twice, no success. And I don't mean a vacuum we clean the house with, it's an actual medical vacuum. And that wasn't successful. They had asked my husband and my mom to leave the room at that time, and they assumed that they were going to prep me for a C-section. Well, that exactly wasn't the case. We have never heard of this trick or seen it in real life or heard of anyone else who's gone through this. What they had done was basically a nurse literally climbed on top of my table, straddled me, locked her arms together, and she says, "Push when I push." And I'm looking at her like, what are you talking about? She literally got up here and started to push that child out of me. I was for sure that she was going to break a couple of my ribs, though they didn't. They had called an additional OB specialist to come to the room to see what his opinion was and whether or not I'd be able to have this baby naturally. Well, he got in there and he proceeded to do the same thing the nurse did, except this time it was a lot more painful. Well, he had thought he had high expectations that we would be able to have this baby naturally. That didn't work. We ended up being prepped for an emergency C-section, and 7.5-pound baby they're expecting me to have? Yeah, no way. He was 9 pounds and 1 ounce. No wonder he didn't want to come out. He was nice and comfortable in there. So we basically got through the delivery. We're able to take our son home a couple more days, and Grandma was here, so of course she's spoiling him. We're getting good treatment. We're getting some naps in there because we're still getting used to the sleep deprivation and all that fun stuff. It was about 2.5 weeks later. Excuse me. Where we took newborn pictures. This is one of them with our friend Gina at the house. This was my last memory. 2 days after taking these pictures, we were watching a movie at home. My mom, my husband, and my son, just relaxing that evening. And when the movie was done, I was trying to put our son Ryder to sleep and was rocking him back and forth while standing. At that time, my husband was walking the dogs. He had come in the house and put the dog leashes up and basically looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" And I guess I don't remember this, but my reply was, "What are you talking about?" He came into the room. Basically, he said that my head was twitching just back and forth consistently. And then my left arm set in place. He had grabbed our son, placed him in the crib, and basically, from the minute he took him from my arms, it was a couple seconds later that I fell to the ground and I had a seizure. Never had a seizure before in all of my life, and I do not remember it till this day. We were picked up by ambulance services and we were taken to the hospital, and I status seized for the entire time. By the time we got to the emergency room, I fell into a coma. I seized for so long. I was able to breathe on my own, and that was a positive thing that gave my family hope. It was about 4 days later that I awoke. I woke up to this room, basically just walls around me with glass doors in front of me, and I'm seeing people walk back and forth. They're all wearing those masks that you see in those TV movies when they're dealing with infectious diseases. So I'm looking at these people and I'm wondering, where am I? What happened? What are we going to do? Nobody familiar was around me, and I was completely in an environment that I had no idea what was going on. There was at a point where a nurse had come in the room and I wanted to vocalize, where am I? What happened? And I couldn't speak. The thoughts were there. I wanted to open my mouth and nothing came. It was a little while after that my husband and my mom had showed up. Again, they had to place those masks on their face in order to come in the room. And they came in and I was finally able to vocalize. I was finally able to ask them, where am I? What happened? Basically, I had endless questions that I knew the answers to none of them. My husband and my mom had later explained to me at that point that I had had a seizure. I had been in the hospital for 4 days, and there was an undetermined cause to actually what had caused that seizure. My mom then kind of proceeded on and said, well, Ryder's with Bill and Nancy, so Sergeant Barry and his wife Nancy. And I looked at my mom, and I said, who's Ryder? That's Ryder. I didn't remember my son. I didn't remember being pregnant. I didn't remember delivering him. I didn't remember anything. This picture was my last memory. It was from that day, from that moment, that Dr. Culver had walked in the room with Chaplain Bulwer, and Chaplain Bulwer looked familiar to me, but I had no idea who Dr. Culver was. He basically proceeded to tell me in a short amount of time that I was headed back to Landstuhl, that my plane was waiting for me at Incirlik, and we were being sent over to Germany because they didn't know what was going on with me, and they didn't have the care for me here. It was when we had got to Germany, being seen after multiple specialists, that finally a neurologist was able to explain to me about what happened. I was pretty much diagnosed with a syndrome that I had never heard about, and I'm sure many of you in the audience haven't heard of it as well. It's called PRES. It's posterior reversible encephalopathy syndrome. So I basically looked at her and I said, talk kindergarten to me. That means nothing to me. She explained that it's a relatively new diagnosis in the world that came up in about the mid to late 1990s. And what it does is it affects women in their pregnancies, and it usually occurs within 24 to 48 hours of the delivery. It affects 5% of those women in the world. She said that one of those, she says 1% of those 5% of that women, it affects later on after you deliver. When you hear those terms, when you're in a medical facility and they say, it's 1 in 1,000 chance, it's 1 in a million chance that you're going to get that side effect, that this is going to happen to you. And to sit there and think that I was at 1% was a really hard thing to grasp. We had proceeded to get the treatment, and they thought that I was good to go back to Incirlik. So about a week and a half later, we were ready to get on the next rotator and head home. Well, that didn't happen. I ran into Chief Dykes and Colonel Craig that day, and they were just extremely happy to see me up walking around, being able to say hello, remembering who people were. And we got to the terminal, and I couldn't do it. I ended up having a funny feeling while at the airport. Wasn't sure if it was anxiety, wasn't sure exactly what the whole situation was. I ended up having an adverse reaction to the medication, the anti-seizure medication they put me on. So we were already checked in, we were ready to go, and we had to get our bags back, and we ended up heading back to Landstuhl. They kept us there for an additional 24 hours to get the medication under control, and it was at that point where I had gotten Cinnabons earlier in the day for Sergeant Barry, because he constantly joked that he wanted Cinnabons. So here we are, we have all these Cinnabons, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this? So I hunted down Chief Dykes, and I'm like, you have to take these back to Sergeant Barry for me. And he did. And I guess he was pretty much bribed and everything else on that plane for people to give it to him, and he just said no. We finally got back to Incirlik. We were here for a couple of weeks, had another small incident here in the club during the town hall, and basically we had multiple trips back and forth from Germany. I'll just leave it up to that. Our last trip was 4 days ago. I got back 4 days ago for follow-up treatment. And it just shows you guys how we're still currently dealing with this. It was our first trip back to Incirlik. And hearing about all the support that my mom, my dad, my son were receiving from our squadrons to complete strangers who we had never met before. She was getting meals, and she was getting diapers. They were getting everything we could possibly imagine. Flower bouquets after flower bouquets. People just randomly stopping by just to have coffee with her in a conversation. And it was when we got off that plane, and we hopped over on a C5. So we weren't with a lot of people. We were with one other person, and it was my husband and I. And we walked through those glass doors at the terminal. And it was seeing those familiar faces out there waiting for us. That was just extremely overwhelming. We knew that my parents and my baby have receiving so much help, but it was so overwhelming to see all those people. I have found out that there's a couple people sitting in this audience tonight
who I briefly met within the last couple of weeks, that I know were the complete strangers for our family and were there to help out. There are so many people on this base that we never be able to thank everybody for what they've done. We will never look at Incirlik as Incirlik Air Force Base. Incirlik has become a family for us. No other base has ever felt like that. You have Penny Craig and Carla Baker coming over to have coffee with your mom when you're not there, just to keep her mind, off of everything. You just don't see that at any other base. I think Penny Craig just really wanted to come and steal the baby. I'm a part of FSS and my husband is a part of LRS. Sergeant Barry used to be my first shirt and then LRS stole him. Wasn't exactly happy about that, but I couldn't have been happier with the fact that he was not my husband's first shirt. He took the lead at being the point of contact for both squadrons and for making sure that everything that my family needed, they received. So when I really truly say that Incirlik has become a family, it really has. But I know it feels that way to so many other people, because there's no way you can walk into the BX or a commissary and not know 5 people in that store and have to strike up a conversation. There's a couple of things within this situation, especially given everything we've gone through, to not remember. I eventually did get back the memory of my son in the delivery. I got back the memory of my son right after the medevac on the way up, and it has slowly come back to me. But the first 2 weeks of his life are a complete blur. I remember delivering the baby. I don't remember anything about what happened at home. We've heard from a lot of people that don't worry about it. He'll never remember. But I will. This is my son today. And he has just been the complete blessing that has got me through this. While backtracking a little bit, while I was in the ICU at Achibottom, there was another spouse from Incirlik who was in the room next to me. So when Dr. Culver and Chaplain Bulwer were there to see me, they were also there to see a woman that I'm sure a lot of us know by the name of Pamela Scott. She was in the room right next to me, and unfortunately, her life was lost way too soon. That takes me back to a conversation that I had with Colonel Craig on that first trip back from Germany. He made a statement. He made a statement for me that has totally impacted my life, and I'll never look at life the same. He basically told me that I was a good luck story. And that made me look at this whole situation as something completely different. I had never thought that a whole week and a half that we were up in Germany that I could have turned the other direction. I never thought that I could have lost my life. My mom had always told me that they had so much hope that I would awake from the coma, which I did, but they weren't sure what my quality of life would have been in waking up. I continue to have medical treatments I've been diagnosed with traumatic brain injury as well, and I continue to deal with memory issues on a daily basis. You can ask my coworkers. That's my excuses. I got TBI when I can't remember anything, and they pretty much let me get away with that one. But it was Colonel Craig's statement about saying that I was a good luck story that had truly made me realize that life is truly precious. And I was lucky. I'm lucky to be standing here before you guys today, able to share my story and to appreciate my life and the life with my family. So the couple of messages that I want to leave with you guys today is to tell your friends, your loved ones, and your family how much you love them, how much you appreciate your life with them. There was a statement that I'd actually come across today, and it said, I'm going to say something first, sorry. I think kind of going back to the stiff story as well, we worry about the what ifs, the what could have, should have been. We have so many unanswered questions for most things in life. But this one thing that I had read today, it basically says, don't let your fears of what happened make nothing happen. We don't live in the state where we wonder about the what ifs, the what could have, should have been, if they had caught this earlier or not. We basically just live our day to its fullest each day. I don't think about the what ifs in the past. My whole life I've truly believed that everything happens for a reason. We may not know those reasons why and never have any answers to it, but I know that God doesn't let us go through anything that we can't handle. So appreciate the life that you have with your friends and family and let them know how much you do care about them. If I could, I've had a couple of questions from people that basically asked me if I could go back a few months from now, back to the time where I had a seizure and my life was changed forever, if I would change anything. And my answer is no. Because he makes it all worth it. Thank you.